You are listening to Detroit Craft Academy, episode number 5.
Detroit Craft Academy. Detroit Crafts with Jody. Detroit Craft Academy.
On today's episode, I talk with Jason Burton. Jason is an artist, educator, small business owner, and the beardy babe behind Burton&Levy's beard combs. I hope that you enjoy this week's episode. If you like the show, be sure to head on over to iTunes and review the show to show your support. And now a quick word from one of our sponsors. Are you or somebody you know planning a wedding? Check out the Rock Sugar Wedding Show featuring local artists and makers at the Rust Belt in Ferndale, Michigan on March 12th. To find out more about the show, head on over to rocksugarevent.com where you can RSVP to this free event. The first 50 brides that attend will also receive a tote filled with lots of wedding goodies. So be sure to RSVP so you can be one of the first in line. And now, on with our show. Hi, Jason. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Jody. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you could join us. So I wanted to start off by asking you a couple questions about how you began. First of all, why don't you tell us where you grew up? And did you come from a creative family?
Sure. So I grew up in and around Flint, Michigan. So actually, first part of my life, we lived right in the suburbs of Flint, and then we moved to a more rural area just outside of Flint, mostly because my folks wanted us to have a little bit more access to nature. But my life sort of revolved around that part of the world, and my folks are all from the Detroit area, born and raised. And did I come from a creative family? Actually, yes, I did. My mom's side of the family were sort of more kind of traditionally creative painters and sculptors, mostly amateur, but really passionate and dedicated. And I'd say that my dad's side of the family is too. They just didn't always think of it that way. Lots of tinkerers and mechanics and people who just love to figure things out and turn old things into new things.
Did you always know that you wanted to grow up and get into art? Or was there something that you remember specific in your childhood that sparked that?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I can't say that I always thought that it's something that I would do professionally. And actually kind of the opposite. Like I said, my family's always been very creative. And I remember some of the first sort of let's do things and make things projects that I would have were these like kind of ongoing projects that I would do with my mom that were paper mache. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was the coolest thing that you can take what basically people consider a scrap and also this flat sort of two-dimensional thing and completely transform it into like a solid, like a real object. It just kind of blew my mind. But I would also say that as much as art was such a part of the rest of my family's life, very few of them thought it was kind of the quote unquote right thing to do it professionally, which is actually a feeling that I had for a very long time. But it wasn't until kind of further into my, young professional life that I thought, okay, that's a leap that almost no one who is close to me has taken. What would it be like to take that leap? Yeah.
So when you first went into college, was that what you went for? Did you start off in art or?
I didn't, and this is I feel like this is a very sort of Oprah moment, but I was very interested in the arts, and also I actually was a rather proud nerd and loved school in general, and that generally meant that people would say like, "Oh, your art is so nice," but think about a real job though, and I know that people listening can't see the air quotes, right? But they're there. And I actually had an art teacher who I think was trying to be so-called realistic, actually telling me when I was applying for colleges that I should not produce or pursue art professionally, that's something that would be a bad decision. we never really got into why, because I was a little bit taken aback, you can guess.
Yeah.
But so from that moment, I actually felt like, oh, I definitely should avoid thinking about those decisions, which isn't to say that I was ever, I know a lot of people were just told not to do, creative things in general are bad or wasteful or certainly worth kind of playing second fiddle.
Yeah.
I didn't experience that, but the idea that it would ever be a central part of my daily life was not something that came to me until, so I did apply for some programs in college, but ended up actually going a much more academic route, and I studied linguistics, which I actually in retrospect find is a pretty creative thing anyway, and has taught me a lot of things relating to making things and understanding the stuff that I do. So,
when did you realize that you wanted to pursue a career in art?
So when I couldn't find work in my what felt like a kind of isolated field, or maybe a little bit insulated is more what I mean, I thought, well, let's see what teaching opportunities there are. And I ended up teaching elementary school at a small private school in New Jersey, because I went to undergrad right outside of Philadelphia. And there was so much energy and enjoyment. I taught second and third graders. So across the year, they were between 5 and I think one of my students was 9. So like a really broad range. And that's the age when kids are really like, the world. I can see the world and I can talk about it. And I'm learning all of the words for the world. And I'm also, almost everything I'm doing every day is like the first time I've done it. And figuring out how to teach them well, figuring out how to understand them and understand their experience just was so hard.
Yeah.
And it was really energizing too. And also for the most part, very genuine. They mostly would have feelings and not have a lot of expectations about how they should act about those feelings or what they're supposed to mean, like what things they're supposed to say, how they're supposed to feel, whatever. And so I got to try a lot of old things in a new way again. And I thought, okay, maybe I take a risk too. Maybe I try to do the art thing in a way that is not necessarily like, oh, I'm going to start a business, but maybe just let's really put some energy behind this. And so I decided, this was in a little bit after I finished teaching. So in the last part of 2004, I thought, okay, in 2005, I'm going to figure out how to get into art school to really, to give this a serious try.
Mm-hmm. So after deciding that you were going to go to art school, where did you start? Did you know what type of art that you wanted to study?
Yeah, so I actually, one of the projects that I'd always done kind of on my own is jewelry making, which is a very unusual hobby, except it's something that I learned actually from my mom's father, my grandfather. And I thought, well, these are skills that I already have, and there are elements of it that I also really, I love small, like treasures. I like treasures, basically. And that's what you can make when you work with metal. So I decided, okay, I'm going actually to, first of all, leave Philadelphia, where I was living at the time, and head back home to Detroit to like figure out how to do the next things. And in the meantime, I'm going to start taking classes, art classes, like formal classes, which I hadn't taken at that point in years. And I signed up for classes at the Oxbow School of Art, School of Craft in the western part of Michigan, it is so beautiful out there. It's so amazing. So I took some classes out there, and they are all run actually by the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which means that they are varied and also like really pretty rigorous. Like they're fun. but you learn a lot and they're really challenging. And I took a blacksmithing class, the first blacksmithing class I'd ever taken, and a jewelry making class. And both of the instructors there were kind of like graduate, or baccalaureate, like postgraduate level teachers. So like they had some ideas about, this is what it was for me to go to grad school. This is what some of my students think about. Here's some stuff for you, Jason. And I thought, okay, so actually grad school would be a great goal for me. And what I need to do for that is to get some experience, some actual studio art experience under my belt and get a portfolio together.
Yeah.
So that's when I started taking classes at CCS in Detroit. So I had originally moved back to Michigan mostly to kind of get into family home base, and it turned out that there was a really great art program nearby that was going to do for me what I needed. So I started going to CCS in their metals program, and took effectively 2 years of classes as a way of getting experience and a portfolio together to apply to grad school at Cranbrook.
And at that point, why did you decide to go to Cranbrook?
Right. So it was a combination of intuition and trying to be pragmatic. So a lot like CCS, Cranbrook is a great school, and also a little bit unknown in the wider circles and very, very well known in its own fields. So it's not something that was on my radar because I hadn't for most of my young adult life been looking for art programs. But once I started looking, everyone's like, oh, this school though, and what it does now and what it has done in the past. It's so wonderful. And I thought, holy cow, here I am. I'm already living here.
That's right under my nose.
Incredible. Exactly. I thought, so the school is full of great faculty, attracts really great students, is a very unusual, almost like a apprenticeship or atelier kind of system where you work primarily with one lead, like instructor or mentor, who then brings in other people and travels out, brings the studio out to other people to learn sort of in these like very practical segments. So I loved the way that was going to teach me, but also a great pedigree can be really important. And I didn't want to discount that as well, especially since I was still trying to figure out what it was that I was trying to do. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to make sure that I was sort of working with the best tools, I guess.
Okay. And what was the experience like when you were at Cranbrook?
Oh, it was, man, it really melted my brain. It was great. It was very, very challenging. And I think, what was it like? Well, for starters, it called on me because of that kind of mentor or lead instructor plus studio mates, or like almost like plus acolytes. It called on us to be very disciplined when we came in, how we organized and attended programs, and also helped create programs and events. But also it sort of said, you need to figure out your own discipline to make it work. And you and I know that as people who make art things and people who run business things, you got to figure out how to make it. You have to do what works. So you have to figure out what works, and you have to figure out more or less on your own how to make it work, because it's never the same for any two people. So I felt a little bit like yay, I hatched out of the egg, but I still have no feathers and I can't see anything. Like I know some people were really ready to jump right out, and I felt like I wasn't, and was still sort of like, oh, how do I move forward? So I actually, kind of took what seemed like the next handhold up the wall, so to speak, and made contact with a sculptor whose work I really loved. And because of the sculpture that he made, whose studio practice I thought I would really identify with, like, oh, this guy makes a certain thing this way, and maybe he also thinks in a way, or like works in a way that I can really learn from and like get along with. And he was in Finland. His name is Tapani Kokko.
Uh-huh.
And he is a wood sculptor. And where I was making like fairly small sculptures in grad school, I didn't always work with metal, but mostly my projects were fairly small. And he did these like 15-foot tall raw wood sculptures that he would, make using like axes and adzes and chainsaws and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And felt familiar enough from all the blacksmithing work, but sort of different in the sense that it's very quick and detailed, but like not necessarily, it doesn't have to be very polished, to be effective. It's like, this is gonna be great.
And how did you find out about him?
I found out about him through my graduate director.
Okay. And then did you just reach out to him and ask if you could, like, what was that whole process like?
It's so great. I actually, there were a few characters who were involved in the scene, and I'll just name them and we'll see how they come. So my director at Grantbrook, who is still there now, her name is Iris Eichenberg, and she is also a jeweler, a contemporary jeweler, which means that she is very interested in working in like unconventional materials and with an understanding of making, again, sort of treasures, maybe using terms that are not like Fabergé or Tiffany's, but rather sort of the methods and the mindset of other media. And she's also originally from Germany and the Netherlands. So over the years that she has been working and teaching, she also has a very broad network, a broader network than I would have ever had. And she knew then some people who were connected to this artist. She saw his work when she visited, I think 2 or 3 years before she told me about him, and said, this guy's work is really going to be up your alley. And it turns out she was totally right. And I thought, well, what the heck? Yeah. I'll send him an email. And guess what? I didn't get a response. Not even a response.
Oh, no.
And so I went back to Iris, and she let me know that her friend and my kind of acquaintance, also a jewelry maker, Helena Lehtinen, was in a way sort of a neighbor with this artist and knew him. Tapani lives in a pretty small kind of community of artists and like really friendly neighbors just outside of one of the towns in southern Finland. And that community is almost all artists. And they know one another, and they all were kind of connected to Helena. So she said, why don't you let me talk to him first?
Oh. And
so she made the contact to him. Finland is a pretty small country in a lot of ways, so very networked, and also they're not necessarily big movers and shakers in the gallery world, which only means that his publicity, sort of like his persona, wasn't really all that well known. So the idea that someone was contacting him for an internship, basically, was not like, oh, I don't have time for such things, but sort of like, who? Like, this guy from where wants to come live with me? And she kind of helped explain, like, yeah, this is really legit. Jason wants to work with you, and, he'll make the bed and do the dishes and all the other things that, and work hard in the studio, all the things that you want from someone who's sharing your space. So there we were. Yeah. I remember very, very clearly, actually, I got an email in December of 2009. It was just after my first term teaching undergraduates in metalsmithing, which, surprise, I was really loving.
So how long were you in Finland, and what ways had going to Finland changed the way that you work now?
Yeah, so I was there for just around 3 months. That was how long the internship was arranged. And I learned I learned a few things. First of all, Tapani's career, so both he and his wife are artists, and his career started very early. He was actually very, he was doing some really great work, but also was really visible in his, basically his undergraduate years.
Mm-hmm.
And then in his graduate years, really like had sort of a launch career, which is great, and which is also something that I couldn't quite relate to because that wasn't really where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also something that you don't quite plan for.
Right.
Sometimes that's where your work is. Sometimes that's how it works for you. Sometimes it doesn't. So that was kind of interesting to learn and see what that does. Also, I loved his work, but it turned out that he and we got along pretty well, but like we didn't quite have as much in common as I thought we might. So the ways that he was making decisions and stuff he was doing weren't quite like, they didn't quite jive with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say that I made a lot of, it didn't like, oh, I'm definitely going to be doing this, but rather like, I need to keep working. And I ended up finding a work partner, also a Finnish artist whose work I felt like a little bit more of an affinity for, or just very different. And we arranged to work together the following year. So I actually came back to Michigan for a few months. I was sort of a studio guest at Cranbrook, so just about a year and a half after I graduated, to participate in critiques, give a few demonstrations, just have a space to work for a few months. And then I went back to Finland and worked at a few residencies. Working with Tapani was at his house in his studio. These other residencies were actually at organizations all around the country, mostly in the north, which is a beautiful and bizarre part of the world where the sun practically doesn't come up until February.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was really incredible. So we traveled around. And whereas working with Tapani was much more about helping him produce his work and working kind of quietly in his studio, these residencies the following year with this artist's name is Reima Hirvonen. Our work together was about moving into these spaces, like these artist studios that these institutions had for kind of rotating arts, and then producing work while we were there based on maybe politics, based on how we were feeling, based on what it meant, like what it felt like to be in northern Finland where neither of us actually lived, based on our relationship to one another, and then launching some of those works into an exhibition. So we usually had at least one gallery show at some point during each of the residencies. And while we were around, we often arranged to have additional presentations or recordings. We were, featured in newspapers, stuff like that. And that's really fun, but it's a little bit like, okay, when you're making something and then immediately confronted with how other people see it or know that you are really working towards it being visible, what do you do? Like, what are you trying to say?
Yeah.
How do you want people to feel about it? So that was really useful. And it's not actually until we're having this conversation that I realized that it's not only marketing, right? But it's related to what are you trying to do? I mean, are you trying to like sell something to someone? Are you actually trying to like freak someone out a little bit? Are you trying to make them think about something? Are you trying to make them feel totally comfortable with what your project is?
So this being your second time back in Finland and really being able to experience the culture over there, what was your takeaway from the entire experience of living in Finland?
Sure. So I was there actually, I want to say it was about 8 months that time. And during that time, it was partly about, the kind of ongoing and changing relationship with Reima, and then also basically developing further the community that I had already created the summer before, and trying to decide, okay, how Reima has already been living before we were together, which was that he was making art, doing exhibitions, traveling around, doing odd jobs to pay bills. How does that work here in Finland, different than in the US? And regardless of how it works wherever, is that a way that I want to live? Is that a way that I can live? I was feeling more and more like I probably couldn't live that way myself, at least not in the United States, because Finland had many more social service benefits than the US does. Unemployment support basically in Finland is generally, I mean, you could say more generous, but I think actually it's just that it's more general. So if you are an artist and you are not employed, you are considered to be a professional who is an artist who is unemployed. And so until you are able to find work, people,
accept that,
accept it and know that part of their taxes contribute to helping you, stay afloat until, it's not like people really live high from it, but it helps you basically sort of tread water until you're able to find work.
Yeah, there's not a negative stigma like there is. It seems to be here, like if you are an artist and you're not making money, then you're unsuccessful here.
Right. That was definitely my experience, and that the stigma was generally pretty lower, and I also, it had the residual impact of keeping artists working fairly steadily and sort of calmly on the work that they really care about, including figuring that out from sort of version to version or stage to stage. But also I think it kept people from taking work, not necessarily, I don't think that you have to love work necessarily, but taking work that didn't make sense or that was actually counterproductive, because they didn't have to necessarily scramble. And so they were doing work that really made the most of their skills and also helped them go further and further with their professional lives instead of sort of distracting from. It's a little bit easy for me to talk romantically about it because I was just like, what is this? All of these things are so different. How does it work? And it was also, they have graduate degrees in the arts and they do not have a huge debt. What is that like?
Oh my gosh.
How is that life? So there was this
oh gosh.
A lot to figure out. So very different. And I thought, well, okay, so maybe I do want to have a life in Finland.
Yeah.
And I started looking into how that worked, and partly why I chose to come back to the States. It really had to do with my family. Because as long as I lived there and as close as I was to the people I lived with, I hadn't really dedicated a lot of time to studying the language, which is, of course, crucial. Right. And I also didn't know if the rhythm of life there and the cost, not just money cost, but the trade-offs or the cost of living so far away from the world I grew up in and really the world that I was educated in, right? So the ways that I knew how to get work or be an art professional in the US didn't look the same as they did in Finland. And could I be okay with being in another continent from my family and also having to pay, visit rarely and pay a lot of money? Would I be able to afford to have a regular relationship? And those things really, really affected me.
So then ultimately you came back home, and then how did your path change when you got back in the US?
So I came back again thinking here I am, totally new chapter in my life, and it feels weird to be starting over, but now I've done this a few times, so I know that as weird and frustrating as it feels, I'm sure I'll figure it out because I just have always figured it out. which is, of course, one of those things that you hear all the time and you don't really, it's like, yeah, whatever, put it on a greeting card, you know, but it's true. I mean, and you probably will never, like, you hear it now and you kind of brush it off until it actually, you experience that for yourself and you're like, oh yeah, like that's what they mean. Mm-hmm. So I came back and started asking around, like, hey, who's got work for me? I knew that the teaching positions that I had before, of course, weren't just available. You can't just pick up in the middle of the semester, whatever. And back to that Detroit area group of wonderful artist people. One of my best friends, Leslie DiPiazza, who's a Detroit area. Oh, she does kind of everything. I mean, she's a jeweler and has a jewelry studio where she sells production work, but she's also an educator and a designer and does some consulting, and she's kind of amazing. Anyway, so she said, hey, I'll give you a leg up. Like, come on over. I heard about some contract work with a local jewelry casting company. They need some skilled labor for a certain amount of time. And I just actually moved into this new house with a friend, and we've got some room. You can crash here. So I went and stayed with her for a couple of weeks and worked with her as well. And that was really cool. And I just sort of like decompressed, or like, you know, got used to the U.S. environment again after being away for so long and thinking that I was going to maybe move away. And she also was the one who clued me into a job listing for this crazy little company called Tech Shop,
which we used to work together at.
That's right.
Actually,
Burton.
So Jason and I both have the same last name of Burton, and when we first met each other, I will always remember meeting you for the first time, because I was in the back office and you walked up to me and you said, Jody Burton, Jason Burton. And I was so taken back. I thought that you were joking, and I was trying to figure out, like, the wires just weren't connecting at all.
That's amazing. I actually don't remember saying that, which is funny because that sounds exactly like something I would say. But also, I remember meeting you, and you were at that moment sort of, you were sort of the de facto like brain of the whole operation, because they were building the building was being developed, and like new staff members were coming in all the time, and you were in the back office where they were managing all like the clerical data and doing all of the administration. And you were sitting at that desk, and I was like, oh my God, like this person knows what is up. Like I just knew, I wasn't sure even what your role was, but you just looked like you were the one who was just like, Roger, I got this. Like just that you had the whole thing moving, which it turns out in many ways was true at that time and at future times too.
Well, thank you. I'm very good at ordering everyone's lunch.
No, well, but that wasn't I remember that wasn't the only thing that you were doing at that time. But anyhow.
So, you came back and then you started working for Tech Shop.
Yep, I came back. I applied originally to be an instructor and kind of gave them all of my information, because it's always back to that teaching. Damn, Jason. Back with that teaching again. Anyway, and they were like, well, we actually want you on as a more permanent staff member. How about you do the floor technician thing, which the shop calls dream consultant. So I got that job, and then several months in was promoted to managing the education program in general, which was really cool. I worked with some really wonderful instructors who were themselves, in many cases, new to instructing. They were very skilled in the technique or the tool that we wanted them to teach to the members. It's a membership workshop, so people, pay money for access and then learn how to use the tools while they're members there. And the instructors themselves were kind of coming in a similar way. They were interested in getting involved and then needed a little bit of guidance on how to apply their skills in the realm of teaching. So I got to learn a ton of new skills, new tools that related to old tools. So like how is a computer-driven mill, or like, metal machining tool, similar to like a hacksaw, and working in a more sort of hands-on, low-tech metal shop. I learned those things. And then I was able to translate that to a bunch of people who had these skills and wanted to figure out how to teach them.
Right. So for anyone that's listening and doesn't know what Tech Shop is it's kind of, it's like a gym for makers where you can purchase a membership, and then you have to take classes, and once you take those classes, you can use the tools for the classes. So like woodworking, laser cutting, 3D printing, and Jason was the one that basically set up the education program there.
Yeah. So if anyone wanted to use the tools, they in some way had to come in contact with me or the program that I was developing and managing, which was a huge kind of interesting challenge and felt like a huge responsibility, because people were coming in like, oh, it would be great to learn how to use that sewing machine. But other people were saying, hey, I really need this tool in order to, I don't know, like tell my boss that I'm ready for that promotion, or in order to try this new product for my business, or in order to take this idea that I have as an engineer and see if I can start a new business off of it.
Right.
And so that was a way of kind of, I don't know, that like exchange of inspiration thing again was happening.
Yeah.
Where people...
It's definitely just an inspiring place to be, because so many people are always coming up with new ideas and stuff. And that's where you started and created your idea for the your bearding combs. That's
right. That's absolutely right. So, traditional craftsperson, I hadn't really thought about what it would be like if I could produce a product, like bunches of the same thing, do a production. And my business is called Burton&Levy, and I'll explain a little bit later where the name comes from and what the history is. But Burton&Levy actually originally started as Buzzy's Beard Combs, and Buzzy is a nickname of mine from forever ago.
Oh, I remember that. I forgot it was called that. Okay.
Yeah. And it was initially kind of a design challenge to myself. How do I use the tools in a way that doesn't necessarily just like, oh, these things look pretty because a machine made them and made a bunch of them all the same. How do I also, again, use a machine to make treasures? And if I can make a bunch of them that have that same feeling, how do I make sure that the people who buy them also feel like connected to them and not just like they're buying, something kind of generic off the shelf? But can I make that a part of my professional life? Like, artist, designer, and like business owner, So I started experimenting with beard combs because I had, do you remember the photo shoot we did? Jody did a photo shoot with me for my first product shots, and I had a beard. It was like a foot long.
I forgot about that. It was some of your jewelry, right?
Well, you did some of my jewelry,
and your beard combs.
Yeah. Yep, you did both. And I just wanted to see what kind of product I could come up with. And that was just around the time that I was becoming aware that beards were also a popular fashion item. And so when I started, dangling it out, people were like, oh yeah, like I love my beard, or my person in my life loves his beard. I would love one of these. And having a business wasn't something that I ever aspired to per se, but man, I'll tell you, the idea that I can make a product that people really like, that is enough in a realm of like creating something with even just a little bit of meaning, and also experimenting with what it looks like and how it feels to have it, and integrating all of the decision making and the marketing and the kind of the language that had come from, being an intern and teaching and, having these artist residencies, like all go into being a business owner.
Yeah.
It just all was like, here we go.
Yeah. It was like all those little steps are all starting to make sense to do something with them.
And I cannot, I will certainly want to point out that, Jody, your experience and your success with your business already at that point, because I want to say that you were going for somewhere around a year by then already with your business, really let me know, like, it not only let me know, okay, this can be done, but also I got to see and ask you about the mechanics, like, how did you get it done? And you gave me a lot of tools to get my business moving.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you. I was like, I think, like I've always felt, I mean, even now, like, even though I've been full-time now for 2 years, I'm always kind of just like, is this really happening? Like, I feel like I'm getting away with something that I shouldn't be getting away with. Don't look, I'm really, I'm not a fraud.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think having that feeling, I totally know that feeling, that the imposter syndrome that I know that a lot of people feel when part of their daily life somehow involves something of themselves. It's so easy to have it, and thankfully people admit it, talk about it more, which feels great and means that there are a lot of like solutions or attitudes to learn from other people about how to combat it or at least respond to it. But also, I think that feeling stinks, but it means something really important, because I feel like it keeps what we're doing. It keeps us asking, is what we're doing what we want it to do? Is what we're making, creating the relationships? Am I giving what I think is really worth giving?
Yeah.
And
totally.
that's so great.
Yeah. So you quit before me, right? At Tech Shop?
I did.
So your launch, you started full time.
I did start full time. A few things fed into that. The first of which was that my work at Tech Shop sort of had reached a ceiling. There was not an opportunity for my program to grow or for me to move in the company. And I'd been doing what was effectively the moment that I left the job that I had, they split it into 3. So you can imagine being the audience. Jody already knows firsthand, I was working, 60 to 80 hours a week for almost 3.5 years. I
remember when you told me that, and like my mouth just dropped. And you were doing the beard combs.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, so this, and Tech Shop is definitely follows like a pretty traditional, is traditional the right word, a pretty familiar anyway, profile for a startup, which means that there's some version of it being about like growing a corporate structure and some version about labor of love. And startups always have some mixture of that, and no two startups have the same mixture. And thinking like, if the labor of love aspect of this is stopping, the returns on the labor of love efforts that I'm putting in are starting to run dry, where can I put that energy elsewhere? Also, my mom, who was kind of my really wonderful artist, but also she made her decision about the do I art or do I not art kind of on the I don't art side when she was younger. And she had a lot of reasons to decide not to pursue art, and reversed a lot of those decisions later in her life, after we kids moved away, was taking a lot of classes, could never quite talk her into doing shows, but was participating more and more in group gallery efforts and just being more out there. So she got sick and died very suddenly. And another one of those, you've heard it before, but you can't feel it until you lived it. Like, no time like the present.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm going to, I jumped in headfirst into getting a master's degree, and I'm going to jump in headfirst in having an art business.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did. I am going to say that it has not been romantic. It is not the best decision for everyone. I'm not sure that there is a best decision, because so much of successful business is you have to do a lot of labor, or you won't be successful, but a lot of labor won't guarantee success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My case, just so that everyone out there knows, I did have a fair amount of money behind me in the form of an inheritance from my grandfather. And when I say a fair amount, we are not talking about like rolling in dough, but enough for me to effectively fulfill my financial obligations and put money into starting a business,
Mm-hmm.
buying materials, buying tools, paying for marketing, that kind of thing. And that seemed like a really, again, when else will I?
Yeah.
When else would I do it?
Well, it's like, and your family is the one that, it sounds like they've been like the leading light behind all of inspiring you to become an artist and be an artist. And how wonderful is that they don't even only like give you that inspiration, but they also support you too.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
is just a wonderful feeling, I'm sure.
It is, and part of, I think that's what's so great, is that they were supporting me doing what I was doing, but in a certain way, I also turned their general love for me towards, like, I converted it into support for that project,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, like, my kind of success, again, at Tech Shop, where I was working in effectively a corporate environment, I was administrator. That also helped me know how to run a creative business. And I had this money that my grandfather left behind for me. And I said, that money is going to be to help me do another thing as an art professional.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that support. It is to support my art life, and that was really great. And wonderful segue, because Buzzy's beard combs, after a fair amount of work upgrading the materials from plastic to metal and upgrading the packaging into a very custom design that I'm very proud of, came a change of name that reflects my family.
Mm-hmm.
So Burton&Levy, everyone's like, oh, you're Burton, where's Levy? Well, actually, those are both of my parents' family names. So my dad is Stephen Burton, and my mom was Lauren Burton, or Lauren Levy. Pardon me, Lauren. Yes. So my dad is Stephen Burton. My mom is Lauren Levy, and to decide how I wanted to design my combs, and also to make sure that they had kind of a treasure and heirloom quality, I decided to design them with certain family members in mind.
Mm-hmm. So when you started the process of designing the new family combs, was that still the same? Was that around the same time that you changed your name? What year did Buzzy's beard combs turn to Burton&Levy?
So the names of the combs, now that I think about it, the names of the combs, the process for making this into sort of a quote unquote family business or a family inspired business was a little bit slow, or it was a steady one. So the combs were originally actually based on family members, and it wasn't until I was fairly into Buzzy's beard combs, I'd say about 9 months in, something like that, 6 months, 9 months in, that I realized, oh, that's really this like family inspiration, these family stories, and this idea of like heirloom, the thing that you care about and you hold on to because of what it is, but also what it means. that's what really said, this is like, that's when I realized that's really the heart of what I'm doing. I need to change the name of my company to strengthen that and to keep my brain always in that place of like thinking, how does this product become more than just a product? It also becomes sort of a memento or like a thing that I really cherish.
Right.
So that happened in, I think I'm going to goof up the dates, Jody. Buzzies debuted the end of 2013, I believe.
Uh-huh.
And
sounds about right.
I think that's right. Yep, that's right. 2013. So I had started working on them maybe that fall and was able to roll them out in the holiday season or just a little bit before in 2013. And then Burton&Levy, I kind of went back to the drawing board and like, man, graphic design, package design, material design, vendors, like total overhaul.
Yeah, you completely rebranded. The new stuff is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That all happened in like spring and summer of 2014.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's going on almost 3 years now.
Almost 3 years.
Burton&Levy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
My official rollout for the product, and here's, I don't think of myself, like I feel like I'm a pretty outgoing guy, but I'm definitely not like a thrill seeker. I definitely don't enjoy being way out there, but I seem to crucially make decisions that just are like, this really scares the crap out of me. Okay, we're gonna do it. So not only did I start my business off of what was essentially a side project at my maker job and like then decide, okay, full time.
Yeah.
My new product, I just remembered, I debuted as a vendor, as an official vendor at the National Beard and Mustache Championship in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, like that's a huge step.
That was my first rollout of the new metal combs in the new packaging with the new branding. I don't remember. I think it was just that I was starting to track down. I thought, well, I got to get my name out there, and I was starting to track down stores and seeing, can I try wholesale? I am still a one-person business. I definitely contract to people, but I'm still the main hub, which has its benefits and it's
That's what I say all the it's like I'm a one-woman show. I can't do it all.
I also am a one-woman show. And
beautiful bearded woman.
I have to. What's that?
I said you're a beautiful bearded woman.
I will say, actually, and I'm not just making this up, it's really true, that most of my single person or small business owner friends are women. And the ones that I find that I have the most productive relationships with and the ones that are often the most inspiring or instructive for me generally are women. And maybe that's a coincidence, but it's really cool. So I just figured I'd put that out there.
I like that one.
Yeah, I think like our women, for example, owning businesses and starting businesses, and in my world, the answer is, oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
So I was just casting around, like, can I work with you, company XYZ? And I, meanwhile, was hearing more and more about like beard aficionados and beard subculture. And when I found out the show was up in Oregon, which of course from Michigan is just about as far away as you can get and still be in the contiguous states. And I just was like, I'll give them a call. They said, sure, you can be a vendor. And so, bam.
So how was that? Did it
It was amazing. I mean, I sold a lot more product than I expected,
Mm-hmm.
and people loved it. And when I say people loved it, I mean they had never even heard of me before because my business was totally new. And these are guys who flew in from all around the country to compete with one another.
So this event is like really about beards, like so much so. You
Yeah.
tracked it down. Did you know
I-
about it before you applied to it?
No, no. I mean, I knew that there were competitions, and I'm trying to remember in retrospect if I. Do you know what? I actually did know that there was a similar. There was some kind of like really large scale show, but the first one I'd heard about was in Alaska. It had happened a few years before, and I didn't know that it moved around. So I was like that's such big time, and also so far away. I'm never going to be able to go.
Right.
And then I found out, oh no, there's this one that's happening, like a similar one that's happening in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, bam, let's do it. And so all of these people who are really, they're kind of like, they're putting their pride and their goodwill and their artistic talent and their kind of camaraderie all behind their presence at this competition, which was great. And then they're coming to my product and they're saying, we love your product. Like,
Yeah.
take my money.
So how
I
did
was
that?
like, okay, great, let's do this.
Did that launch at that event change the way that your business was being run then? Because you just completely rebranded at that point.
Right. It did. I think it let me know that I was on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
It let me know immediately what kinds of improvements and additions and edits also that I needed to make with the languages that I was using and my in-person display. It let me know also that there are ways to make sales with my product outside of the holiday season that look different than when I'm at a holiday fair. And it also, because I was so popular with, I mean, these are the guys that I want to sell with. So the fact that they bought from me was not a surprise so much as a validation, right? Like, if they weren't going to buy from me, my thought wouldn't be, well, I just need to sell to someone else. These are the people I'm selling to. So if they were not interested, I would know that I would have to make big changes.
Mm-hmm.
But since they were interested, the ways they were interested told me I can move away from, or I don't have to just think in terms of how to make the person-to-person sales, say through Etsy or an online store, but that maybe I should be talking to retailers and really try my hand at the wholesale game.
Well, yeah, especially since you found your niche and those are the people, they actually responded to what you were making.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
So how has your business changed since you've done that show and since you've launched Burton&Levy?
How has it changed?
Or
the first,
or just like how has it changed? How has it gotten bigger?
Right. I would say the parts that stick out the most to me. Well, okay, so I feel like the things that I notice or really focus on are maybe a little bit different than what you look at externally. The parts that I focus on are the ways that the language and the image and my design process have both refined and gotten faster. So not only do I think that my graphic design and the language that I use feel a little bit more tuned in and a little bit more effective, I also get there a lot faster now than I used to be able to. I find that especially true in graphic design. And of course, everyone has their own taste for graphic design. And mine is a little bit off the beaten path because it's not something that I've studied. Like I do what I think fits my brand and what sort of quote unquote tastes right for me using the skills that I have.
Yeah, it's a self-taught process.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that is very much how my business has changed. And that design process also comes to my products. More maybe from a larger point of view, or from sort of outside my own my own head. The focus of my business has been much more on wholesale. So I work much more with retailers through the year than I do necessarily direct customers.
Mm-hmm.
Given the way that my business has grown, which is steadily but not like shooting star, I decided that my one major, well, sort of my two major outsource like ongoing outsource efforts are with bookkeeping, like accounting,
Mm-hmm.
and marketing, especially digital media. So I have, you could kind of consider her a staffer, although actually she does contract work with me. I have an ongoing relationship with a social media and marketing specialist named Abby Hambright. She works out of Chicago, and she
Mm-hmm.
herself is a craftsperson and a maker. So she gets the business and has worked in marketing for those kinds of businesses for several years. So she knows what tools are available. She knows how to dial up and down the efforts based on what time we have going and sort of the size of my business. And also I've expanded my product line outside of combs, but still within the right kind of the person. I think about the person or the people that I want to be selling to.
Yeah.
And then give them products that I think like they'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, they're products for beardy babes.
Yeah, I love it. It's totally true. It's totally true. Yeah, so this is, getting back a little bit to, kind of what are you giving when you make your thing. I would love for people, men and women, whomever, to see my product and sort of have an imagination of either who uses my product and likes it, or like kind of how they feel about themselves when they use it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm a friendly guy, and I like to be. I don't know how to say it. I like my products to be high quality and accessible and intricate, and they make you smile and feel friendly,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. Just that when you interact with my products, a certain version of you comes out,
Mm-hmm.
and that version is like a really warm, funny, interesting sort of person. And I know that the product, it's so interesting. It's like, that's the aspect of marketing or lifestyle product that is actually the magic of things. Like when you make stuff, that's the magic that I think we are maybe sometimes confusing with just like marketing manipulation. I mean, that's really a reason that we love to have objects in our lives, because they help us create our world. They feel a certain way, and they help remind us to feel a certain way, or to like project ourselves in a certain way. And I realize that sounds like a lot to say behind a comb. I certainly don't think that a beard comb does all of that.
No, but
it contributes to it.
Yeah, well, and it also, too, just as a consumer and buying from somebody that makes handmade stuff, knowing the story of where that thing came from and how that was thought up, and then holding that thing in your hand and knowing that thing has a story, and then taking that story and making it your own.
Sure.
What have you learned from running your business that you think was different than something that you learned in your journey through art school and teaching?
A very crucial thing that I've learned is how to make the most of limitation, or how to recognize limitation as sort of defining your palette as opposed to just missing. Mm-hmm. So instead of like, oh, I would do it this way except I'm missing a tool, you just think, well, this lets me know that I have these tools and not those tools.
Right.
So for example, I do a lot of my design work already in a program called Corel Draw, which I think still has a fairly limited use in graphic design, and also is has like a quality to it that the graphic conventions are maybe a little bit less popular than some of the other programs. And so I think like, oh, well, so then how do I get it to do the best that it can do and really make that feel like my project and my brand? And that's so helpful. Yeah. So I'm pushing myself without feeling sort of hobbled by limitations. I've often actually made design decisions based on what I can and can't do, either because of cost or method. So like when I made the package design for my combs, and describing them is actually a little bit funny, but if you go to my website and you look at them, you're just like, oh, I get how this goes together. But like in words, it's a little bit funny. But basically, it's a cardboard back piece that has a little cutout where the comb sort of nestles into the cardboard, and then there's a clear plastic that goes over the top. So it's almost like a little glass case in a way, like mini glass case.
Yeah, they do look like little mini glass cases. The packaging is really, I really enjoy your packaging.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, that has been something else. The packaging, the way I design my product actually informs how I continue to design my product. So the way that I knew that I was going to find a lot of success in retail is in part because people are saying, oh, this packaging is great, but also, oh, this packaging feels like a gift. And I thought, aha.
Yeah.
If it feels like a comb, then it's going to be at a pharmacy. But if it feels like a gift, then it is going to be in a specialty shop or a fancy barber shop or a gift shop.
Totally. What have been some of the bigger, what you think is the biggest challenge you've had to overcome running your business?
I think figuring out what size I want my business to be. Because I'm kind of, I say that my business is actually like micro production, or like mini industry. So I'm doing industrial production. I mean, I've worked with vendors who do, who laser cut steel, for example, who are also laser cutting, where I'll get like 300 pieces. They're laser cutting for, like the, U.S. government contractors or aerospace, stuff like that, where lots and lots and lots of product parts are very, very precision parts. And at the same time, I'm the guy who is making and deciding on all the designs. I'm the one who's doing all the quality control. And then I'm the one who's making and producing the packaging, doing all the finishing and quality control part 2, and then packaging and selling the stuff. So how big do I want it to be, and what is it that I'm trying to do? Am I hoping to start making, thousands of these and be like a household name, which is only one of many possibilities, but I feel like a lot of people, especially, who think of Shark Tank and stuff like that, imagine that one version of having a business is sort of like winning the lottery through elbow grease instead of with a lottery ticket, that you'll create the next big fad and suddenly you'll be, rolling in dough. And so figuring the difficulty has been a little bit like, how do I keep the relationships with my customers and my retail customers like healthy and growing while also maintaining the size? And I'm actually at a stage right now where probably I'll have to grow up in size or restructure.
Yeah, so that's that's a current challenge that you're also dealing with.
Yeah, and I've known a few businesses who actually launched with different resources than I, but launched around the same time that I have, and many of them have gone the get big in corporate route. Some of them in ways that I really care about, and that's really tricky care about meaning, if you started using local materials, are you still using local materials? If you started using local labor, are you still using local labor?
Right.
Or domestic anyhow? When you started using energy efficient processes, can you hold to that when you've tripled or quadrupled your output?
Yeah.
A few of them have not done that, and I'm like, I care about that too much. I care about how it feels for me, but I also care about contributing to consumer culture and kind of paving the way for what I think is going to be a real change in what materials we can use and how we use them.
Yeah.
Like generally in the world.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, and now just like with the general climate of everything too, it's, we're in a day and age where businesses need to be very considerate and, we need to consider where are we sourcing these materials from.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And part of it is about, okay, so I'm working with recycled metal, which I am, as much as it's not like 100%, but I get a confirmation from my supplier on a fairly regular basis that it's at least 90% recycled material. And that's really great. But, I'm also, by working with local vendors, I'm also helping maintain jobs. Like I really care about that. We are helping one another sustain ourselves financially.
Yeah.
And that's really great. And I am not sure, Jody, but I think the direction that I'm going right now is moving towards products that are even a little bit rare and even a little bit more special. I know some of them are going to be a little bit more expensive than what I currently have, but mostly they're going to be, instead of now going to a line of like 25 products, I'm probably going to keep it where it is now, or maybe a little bit smaller, but make some of the products really niche.
Yeah.
So this is the only one that you're going to find. Two of my combs right now are made out of brass, and I love that look. And if I tell you that you have now an heirloom comb made out of brass, you're like, oh, that totally makes sense. Like it changes beautiful golden brown colors. It's a very nostalgic kind of material. It also actually has the really cool property of being antiseptic. So when you're using it on your face, it actually will it will not get like gross, basically like cheaper combs will. And I realized that so it's the only brass comb that I've found on the market. It's a little bit tricky to work with, but also people really love it. And I figure, why not have a few things that people really love instead of the kind of siren song of like Burton&Levy corporate giant.com. In part because I'm not also set up to do that.
Right.
I love having a business, but I'm not, it's not my dream or even maybe my skill to be a corporate magnate. So it's not likely that I'm going to be this huge international entity. And so right now I'm a small international entity. I actually have right around 50 retailers, and I am international to the extent that I have one store in Canada, one store in Mexico, and one store in Sweden. And I'm actually trying to grow those a little bit.
Yeah.
But mostly I'm in boutique design shops, salons, and men's gift shops around the country. And man, I love it.
And if you could go back in time and give yourself advice, what advice would you give yourself?
I probably would have hooked in with one of the small business incubators in Detroit a little bit earlier on. I think I told myself that was those kinds of like seminars and maybe even grant application, like orientation stuff like that. Like that's not where I'm going yet, so I don't need to know. I actually think that if I had been able to be just a little bit more open to just having that information in my mind, it would have helped me imagine a few more possibilities. I think it would have helped me predict a little bit better what direction my business would go in, or like some of the challenges that I would come upon. I think that that's probably the advice that I would. And then part of that too would be yes, I'm a single person business. Don't shy away from having a buddy, even if it's like, hey, I want to do this thing, or I'm trying this thing out. Will you just come with me?
Yeah.
I've always felt really good at and really grateful for like sort of spur of the moment design critiques. I've got some people who, and it's interesting, like you get really great feedback from people who are familiar with talking design, but then also when you're selling a product, you get great feedback from people who really never think about it. And so are coming to it as though they are, with total honesty, and as though they are customers who are having kind of a gut reaction. But when it came to actually learning about the nuts and bolts, some of the behind the curtains stuff, making sure that, it's okay to say in that same way, hey, you don't have a business, you don't even make stuff, but we love being around one another and you love to learn things. So come with me to this XYZ. Help me make sure that I take good notes. See, try a new thing with me. I think I would have told myself to maybe take that leap a little bit more often.
Do you think you didn't go to those things because maybe like you were intimidated, or just because like your mind wasn't in that space to go to those?
I think it was a little bit of both. Yeah, it was a little bit of all the above. I think it was a little bit more about being intimidated than it needed to be. I think part of it too was just I was so overwhelmed because there's such I describe starting a new business, especially the way that I did, as building a boat when you're already in the water. Which, I mean, not only has, tells you like, oh, it's really tricky because you needed it already, everything you needed already, but also it's very hard to get more than one perspective because you're just floating in the water. There's no way to get above or easily below your product or your project.
I like that. I agree with you about like wishing that I would have taken those steps to maybe be more a part of the community that we have here. I've always been very intimidated to even just approach people that are more knowledgeable about things. Yeah. Maybe it's just something that I've learned with aging, but it's like you can't learn to do anything if you don't ask questions. And maybe being intimidated to me has been, I don't know about it. I want to learn, but I don't want to look like I'm an idiot.
Right. And learning, I mean, what a life skill too, right? Like learning that some people will reject you and some people will be incredibly generous. And that's kind of true everywhere. And you kind of in any sector of life. Yeah. And figuring out, it's just having my own business that like where I'm trying to meet standards and like fantasies of what business is like and what successful business is like, while at the same time feeling totally in control of deciding for myself how it looks. I mean, like money is it's of course very important, but it's not as how you make it and what you do with it is so inconsistent, or like it's never the same at different times of the year. It's never the same from business person to business person. And you suddenly realize that the idea that you have a business to make money is only one important truth. And I think in some ways it's like, it's unrealistic to think that that's actually the only thing we're doing when we have professional lives. And having my own businesses let me really see that. It's thinking outside of like, salary and promotion and all that stuff is really messy also because so few people live in that space. That's
the really scary thing about owning your own business is you never know where your next paycheck is going to come from. And,
Absolutely.
Just being, you just gotta live it and just do it.
You totally just figure it out.
Yeah. And for our final question, Jason, what is the weirdest thing anyone has ever said to you while you were vending at a show?
So in addition to the T-shirts that I've designed that are on my website, I also, when I'm at in-person sales, have greeting cards that I sell with the same drawings. Mm-hmm. And they are happy and free beardy men flying naked through the sky, because wouldn't that be so wonderful to be able to have a moment like that? And this was like a year ago, and a couple, I'm guessing that they were husband and wife. The wife goes up to the cards, with that whole kind of like, I'm just browsing thing, like sort of leaning forward a little bit, looking at stuff with her hands clasped behind her back. And she gets to the cards and she says, like, oh, like kind of laughing, like, oh, Bob, you got to come look at these. And so Bob comes around and looks at one of the drawings. He says, is that hair on that guy's butt? That's just unnecessary. And I walked away, and I thought, success. Total success.
So, Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you. Let's do it again.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a great time.
If you would like to find out more about Jason and his beard combs, head on over to his website at Burton&Levy.com. You can also find pictures of Jason and his products, along with links to his page over at DetroitCraftAcademy.com. If you like the show, be sure to give it a review on iTunes. And remember, you can also listen on Stitcher and SoundCloud. I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode, and until next week, keep crafting your dreams.